Hey, good morning. So we're in this series called Talking to Myself, and what I'm trying to convince you is that you talk to yourself, and some of you don't need convincing of that. You know that already. The idea is we all have this inner voice. We're always saying something to ourselves, and we're either telling ourselves truth or we're telling ourselves lies, and we don't always fact check ourselves. And the big question is, in this series is, could a key to a new year and a new you be how you talk to you, how you manage that inner voice? You probably do it more than you think, and it probably matters more than you know. And what we're saying is this: if you need to make sure you're filling your life with truth, or your self-talk will tell you lies. It's not a series about positive thinking. It's about truth-telling to yourself and living that truth out. As a matter of fact, last week we really talked about living out the truth of doing what you know to do. And I told a story about a year ago, last March. I was at a season when I was in the weeds, and I'm a frequent flyer there, and I was in the weeds in life, and I called a friend of mine named Paul that we hadn't seen each other in a while, but we talk all the time. He's 18 years older than me, but we were on staff together with Hockey Ministries. He's just a really, really good friend. And I said, hey, I'm going to Florida for a conference. You live in Canada. You probably could use some sunshine. Why don't you come down and meet me, and let's just hang out. I could use some time just sitting across the table from you. So he met me in Florida. We were in this place in Tampa called Ybor City, and we were sitting drinking Cuban coffee, and he said, well, tell me what's going on. And I kind of poured out kind of what was going on. And he's one of those people that's extremely safe. I know he's unconditionally kind of on my side, but he's also a truth teller. Like, he's the perfect combination of who you want sitting across the table. And so I just poured my life out, and he sat there and he listened. And he goes, all right. When I got done talking, he said, all right. He said, Doug, you've probably sat across the table from people who've told you similar things about what they're going through. It's like, yeah. He goes, okay, well, what would you tell you if you were sitting across the table from you? That's the question we did last week. And what he got to the heart of is, there's times in life you need new information. Much of the time, we need more application. We need to do something with what we already know. Information usually is not the biggest challenge, but sometimes it helps. Sometimes we do need it. Where most of us struggle is with application. That's what we talked about last week. Well, I want to pick up on that story because I don't always get a lot of things right in life, but I think what I got right there is I figured out who needs to be around the table in my life. And Paul Allen, this guy lives in Toronto, like he and a guy named Tim and a guy named Mark, when we were on staff together with Hockey Ministries, like we invited each other to the table literally and figuratively often in life in a way that made us better. Who is sitting across the table from you in life deeply matters. And you need to develop the skill and habit of inviting the right people to the table in your life. And that's what we're talking about today and why it matters. And there's a story in the Old Testament. It's in 1 Kings chapter 12. It's a story about a guy named Rehoboam. Now, Rehoboam's dad was Solomon, wisest person who ever lived. Main author and contributor to the book of Proverbs, a book of wisdom. A wise guy, but often acted, even though he knew what to do, he didn't do what he would tell him if he was sitting across the table from him. Application was a problem for him at times, but he was wise. That's Rehoboam's dad. Rehoboam's granddad was David, like David and Goliath. Like David, you read about in the Old Testament, one of the authors of the book of Psalms, like David, this man after God's own heart, amazing man. Rehoboam, he didn't quite live up to the family name, maybe to some of their mistakes, but not to some of their positives. But he's not king for very long, and he starts letting things fall apart. Like literally the nation of Israel was a united kingdom until Rehoboam came along, and it split under his watch. And I'll tell you one of the things that led to it that has a lesson for us about who sits across the table from you. And in 1 Kings chapter 12, it says this: Jeroboam and the whole assembly of Israel went to Rehoboam, that's the guy that's Solomon's son, David's grandson, he's now the king. And they said to him, your father, who's Solomon, put a heavy yoke on us. But now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you. So that's what the people's request. Your dad was kind of hard on us, but if you go easy on us, we will do anything for you. And then he does something really smart. There's a lesson here, like how you handle decision making. Rehoboam answered, go away for 3 days and then come back to me. So the people went away. He bought himself some time. Have you ever noticed that some of your best decisions are the one where you go, hey, let me think about that for a minute? Impulse decisions are not always the best decisions. Give me 3 days. That's a good job, Rehoboam. Well, way to go. Okay, that's good. He makes another good choice. Verse 6, then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who had served his father Solomon during his lifetime. That's another great move. Always ask others for their opinion. Wise counsel, wise advice. Many advisors, like the Bible speaks of a lot. Solomon wrote about that as a wise choice. And these were the advisors to the wisest person who ever lived. These guys probably had some mad wisdom skills. So he says, I'm going to ask them for advice. He wasn't looking for advice. He wasn't on a truth quest. He was on a happiness quest. He knew what he wanted, but he asked them. It's still a good step. How would you advise me to answer these people, he asked. They replied, if today you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servants. That's a great answer. Like, power and leadership is a call to serve, not to take. And you look at the best leaders, they serve. The leaders that probably drive you crazy are the ones that they take and they use it for their own advantage. Great advice. Verse 8, but Rehoboam rejected the advice of the elders gave him and consulted the young men he had grown up with and were serving him. So again, great advice. He rejects it. That's not necessarily a mistake if it's the wrong advice. But who he goes to next are his high school buddies who are kind of the hanger-oners. They're wanting power for self-service, and so they're aligning with the king. And then look at this other thing he does. He asked them, what is your advice to his high school buddies? How should we answer these people who say to me, lighten the yoke your father put on us? He abdicates leadership. He gives up leadership. It's not a me thing anymore. It's a we thing. I love pronouns. They tell you a lot. And right here, sometimes when a leader says we instead of me, it's a good thing. But right here, Rehoboam, you're in charge. Don't hand the keys to your car to your high school buddies. They're going to crash it. Don't give up the leadership that God put you in a place where you're supposed to be leading and follow the crowd. Here's their advice. The young men who'd grown up with him, replied, these people have said to you, your father put a heavy yoke on us, make our yoke lighter. Now tell them, my little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid on you a heavy yoke. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions. Well, that's a way you can go, I guess. I mean, that's not exactly the serve the people approach, but that's their advice. So who does he listen to? Well, before you jump too quick to saying, well, it's obvious who you should listen to, let me ask you this. Who do you listen to? When you have a big decision to make, who do you call? Who do you text? Who do you invite to lunch or coffee? Who's sitting on the other side of the table from you? Who's sitting on the other side of the text from you? Who's the one that you look to for approval once you make a decision? That person matters more than you think, makes a difference more than you can imagine. Who do you listen to? Well, he decides to listen to his high school buddies. 3 days later, he calls the people back. Then in verse 13, it says this, the king answered the people harshly. Rejecting the advice given him by the elders, he followed the advice of the young men and said, my father made your yoke heavy, I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips, I will scourge you with scorpions. He parrots the words of his high school buddies. And the result wasn't so good. Verse 15 says, so the king did not listen to the people. And at that point, the kingdom of Israel starts to split into two. They fight against each other, kind of a civil war. Everybody in the story, it does not go well for them in the end. And if you were to look back and if future Rehoboam could talk to current Rehoboam and say, hey, do you think you made the right decision? I don't think you did. He makes this huge mistake of a decision because he followed the crowd, he followed his buddies, and in a way he followed his heart. He wanted the power. or that you wanted to do what's right? Who are you listening to in life? Who are the groups of people that you could go to right now? Who's the version of the wise people in life you could go to with a decision and say, hey, I've got this fork in the road, or I've got this thing going on, or here's my life and here's what's going on. Who are the wise people? Who's the Paul Allen for you the way he was for me? Who is that for you? Who are the unwise people that you're tempted to go to that you know they're going to give you advice that's more about what you want to hear or what they want for your life, but maybe not what's best for your life? A couple weeks ago, we gave this question to think about. A way of decision making is if you just decide in the present, you're going to end up chasing your tail and end up in the ditch a lot of times, because following the heart is terrible advice, and it's a terrible way to live. You want to live future-minded. Who do you want to become? Someday, who do you want to be? More importantly, who does God want you to be? What does he have planned for you? And if that person has more of a voice today, you'll make different decisions today. And the question we threw out there is, what would future you tell current you about the choices you're making today? I can tell you a huge clue into who future you is going to be. Whoever those people are you surround your table with, that's going to shape future you. The people you listen to are a preview of the future you. So who's around your table? Verse 15, the king did not listen to the people. He did not listen to the wise elders. He listened to his high school buddies. Who are you listening to? Because those people, and if you can even think of who they are, you might look at your last 5 text messages. I'm going to play that game really quick. I did not think about that, but these are some wise people. 4 out of 5, really wise people. And if you texted me recently, do the math. 4 or 5 chance, you're wise. Again, if you have a big decision, who do you call? If you're in a tough spot in life, who do you say, hey, could we get together? Paul Allen's on that list for me. Who is that for you? Because the people you listen to are a preview of future you, and I am more of who I am today because of people like Paul and Mark Osborne and Tim Burke and Mark Porter and Brian Sanderson and other people in my life that at times I've sat across the table from them and they've spoken wise things into my life. I know a lot about who future you is if I just look at who you're spending time with. As a matter of fact, if the person you spend a lot of time with is in the room right now, you might just glance over at them and think about their wisdom. Scale of 1 to 10, how wise are they? Here's a preview. Preview of future you. Some of the best people in our lives that we look to the most are some of the people that are most often in our lives. They give us advice. They help us make decisions. They shape our values. They shape our beliefs. And some important questions you would ask about the people in your life is this. Who do I get my advice from? Who do I listen to? Who do I look to for approval of my choices? And what is my ultimate guide? Is it the world? Or is it the Word? Because the wisest people that are speaking truth into my life are letting this speak truth into their lives and having God speak truth into their life. Again, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. Proverbs 13:20 says this, walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. You are going to become like the people you listen to, the people you walk with, the people you do life with. The older you get in life, the more control you have over that group of people. So how are you controlling that group of people? This idea that those who walk with the wise will become wise is a law of life. Kind of like the law of gravity. If you take a long walk off a short ledge on a tall building, you will fall to the ground. That doesn't change. 100% of the time on this planet, gravity is a law of life. Well, so is relationships. There's a relational law of life that you will be like the people you hang out with. There's a certain gravity involved, a pull toward their values, their beliefs, their behavior, their words, everything. What if this is not just a warning to us to make sure that we're surrounding our life with wise people, but telling us, you better be wise with the people that are around you? Paul said it like bad company corrupts good character. That's one of the things he wrote to the church in Corinth. Bad company corrupts good character. And I always heard that as, I better make sure I'm surrounding my life with good company, not bad company. But what if some of the time I'm the bad company, corrupting the good character? What if I'm bringing sometimes the bad habits, language, choices into the relationship? And I talked to some college students. We did our college gathering for college students at Live Oak, at Tech on Friday night. And I asked them the question, does the room get better when you walk in? Are people better off for you being in their life? If people are walking with you, are they becoming more wise or more foolish? We're going to influence the people around us. But that principle is reversed. The people around us are going to influence us. Are you better off because of the people that are around you? Are you becoming the you that God created you to be, who he's working to help transform your life to become based on the people? Because he's going to use the people around you. He created us to live that way. What if we took seriously the law of relationship? What if we leveraged our relationships to better our lives? And what if I leveraged my life to make other lives better? That I was contagious in a great way to the people around me. That I brought wisdom to the text message. I brought wisdom to the coffee. I brought wisdom to the family room, to the classroom, to the cubicle, wherever it is you find yourself on a Monday. What if we decided we're going to make sure that influence counts? Our influence on others and their influence on us. And we leverage that for God's good purposes in our life. In the end, you got to really be clear. Just like I'd say, monitor your inner voice. What are you telling you? Listen to the voices around you, because they will become your inner voice. And some of us are saying stuff to ourselves that somebody told us a long time ago, and it's either doing a lot of good or a lot of harm. You are the gatekeeper for what voices you let into your life. And the older you get, the further you go, the more you have control over that. And you got to leverage that with intentionality. Let me tell you a way that I know a friend of mine does that really intentionally. Mark Adams is an assistant coach on the Texas Tech men's basketball team. This is Mark right here. He coaches the defense, and he's always been a very good defensive coach. He's been a head coach at times. He's very successful. He has a very strong winning record anywhere he's been a head coach. Every program he's come into as a head coach, he's an assistant coach at Tech. Every place he's come into as a head coach, it was a losing team that turned it around and had a winning record. He's been very successful. Numerous Coach of the Year honors. He's an assistant coach at Texas Tech. We've been friends for about 18 years. Mark would say we've been friends for 2 years, and he won't tell me which 2 of those 18 it is. But we've been friends for a while, and what I've learned, he's got a really good mind, not just for defense, but for character, for his faith. And one time, I figured out where he got a lot of it. And in 1985, he sat down, and the way he creatively asked somebody to speak into his life was he went to his dad and asked him to write him a letter for a Christmas gift. His dad, Tom Adams, was a farmer in Brownfield. And much like it goes for farmers, sometimes years are good and sometimes years are bad. This was a bad year. And money was very, very tight. So Mark, the good son, said, "Dad, don't buy me anything for Christmas. If you would you just write me a letter? And all the things you've been saying to me over the years, would you put that down on paper to help me as a coach and as a person and as a Christian?" And his dad reluctantly said yes. And he wrote this letter, and it's 7 pages. Here's a picture of the letter, 7 pages, typed out. And he starts off by saying, "At your request, I have put together the things that you and I have discussed many times." This was stuff that his dad had been saying to him over the years that had shaped Mark's inner voice. And it was good stuff. It helped Mark be very successful as a coach. This was early on in his coaching career. He was a coach at Wayland Baptist University at the time. This was his second school where he would coach. I think he's been at 8 or 9 different schools as a head coach. That year, they went to the finals of the NAIA basketball championship, lost in overtime by 2 points. He was a very successful coach, and a lot of what he did was from this stuff from his dad. Well, his dad was an athlete too. He went to Tech on a football scholarship and he was a boxer. He transferred to Hardin-Simmons. He's in their Hall of Fame because of 3 years playing football and 4 years boxing. He was a 6-time state champ boxer. His record in boxing, out of 100 career decisions, he only lost 8 times. And a big part of his life was mental toughness. And he put all this in this letter. And he said, I'm a fighter, you're a basketball coach, but every contest is a battle. So there's a lot of carryover. And for 7 pages, he puts this stuff down on paper. And at one point he says, make sure you don't neglect any area of your life because you're made up of different parts of life. Career, financial, health, including your fitness, including your mental health, social, spiritual. At one point, he makes this comment because Mark had just bought a new car. And in the middle of this coaching advice, where he talks about motivation and discipline and winning, he says, I just heard about your new investment. Talks about the car. 3 reminders. All cars end up in the junkyard. It's not how much you make, it's how much you save. And a lesson in economics, spoken as a farmer who had to be prepared for the lean years. It's impossible to anticipate financial needs without a savings. A person goes from crisis to crisis. Just another plug for Financial Peace University, if that's you. This was his advice in 1985. And he talks about all these other things about winning and coaching and even PR. I mean, he just goes into all these different things, and he ends the letter this way. If you send this to Sports Illustrated, I want the royalty. If I had the money to buy you a pair of socks, I would throw this letter away. But I bet Mark wouldn't. And Mark didn't. He keeps it to this day. And matter of fact, he shared it with me. He goes, hey, this was very impactful for me. Well, Tom passed away 3 years ago. And I bet it's even more meaningful to Mark now. But the thing is, these things that Tom wrote down on the paper that now is kind of the inner voice for Mark's life, Mark doesn't need them on paper anymore. It's inside, it's internal, it's his inner voice. How could you be intentional of inviting somebody to speak some truth into your life? Who would you go to? What's your fishing pool for wisdom? Who is someone that you would look at and go, man, I want them to put some of the wisdom that I've heard them say to me or others, put that down on paper. How could you creatively get somebody to speak some wisdom in your life? Maybe ask someone to write you a letter. Or think of some other ways. Maybe it's beyond writing a letter. How could you invite some other voices into your life to be intentional about having others speak wisdom into your life? Who could that be and how would you do it? For me, it's calling a friend in Toronto and saying, hey, can we meet up for a couple days? Just hang out. Be transparent, honest, and intentional with them. How could you do that? And who is that for you? Again, who you invite to the table, who fills these seats around your life are the ones that will shape who you are. So be intentional about that. So anyone ever play fantasy hockey? Anyone ever play fantasy football? I know at least a few of you play fantasy hockey because we're in the same league that I'm leading. And here's why I love, and some of you are like, I don't get it. The key word of what you're playing is fantasy. It's not real. Let me tell you the appeal of that for those of us that do. It gives us a sense of kind of being a GM for this imaginary team. Like we get to pick our players and we have some kind of control of the situation. And then we get to kind of see, like, how did I do? And for us, some of us, we're more intentional about being GM of our fantasy sports team, football, hockey, whatever it is you do, than we are about for our own life. You are the general manager who determines who's in your life. And sometimes people get traded to your team and you don't have a choice. You have more control than you think of who sits at your table, and you have more control than you think of who speaks into your life, of who you listen to, and then what you do with it. And it's time for some of you to draft some people, to sign some free agents, to invite some people to the table, and in a creative way, say, write something down. Let's have coffee. Let's meet for lunch. but I need to walk with the wise. Even if you don't have a big decision, you're making decisions every day that's shaping who future you is going to be. One of the ways we try to help you get a running start in that is through small groups at Live Oak. We believe in Christ and community. We want to connect people to Christ and community. Now, small group is not equal to community, but we believe it's a running start and a front door to that being possible. There are people who are in small groups who aren't in community. They just attend an event. They don't leverage it relationally in their life. But many, many do, and it's very effective. There are some people that are in community that aren't in a small group, but they invite people around the table. But we believe groups can be extremely effective for helping you get some people around the table in your life to not just get information, but to try to do life together in a way that it moves you forward. And it's not just what other people will influence you and what they'll speak into your life. It's what how you're going to influence and speak into other people in that group. We think it's incredibly important. And we have different kinds of groups: men's group, women's groups, college groups, marrieds and mixed groups, Bible study classes, Financial Peace University. You heard about it. Brandy talked about it earlier. And for some of you, this is a next step. This is a way where you invite some other voices into your life. For any of you that want to be in a group, we're in this season called Group Launch. It's a season. It's like this time of the year where there's some on-ramps into small groups. And usually, like, if we can't find a group that fits for you, it gets on our radar and we start looking. We want to connect as many as possible to Christ and community. And if you're interested in a married or mixed group, tonight you've got an opportunity to be a part of a mixer that several new groups are starting at once. There's some other groups that are already going that are looking to add some people, but there's some brand new groups that starting in 2 weeks. Is it 2 weeks, right? They start? Yes, thank you, February 10th. But today is the day, not February 10th. That's when they start, but today is the day to take that step. And you could go to the Live Oak website for any of those groups and say, I'm interested. You also go to the Live Oak app, but if you go on the Live Oak website, it'll give you some more information and say, I'm interested in this type of group, and then we'll help you find it. And if you're in a married or mixed group, sign up. Everyone should sign up today, but sign up today and come to that mixer tonight, because then you're going to have a chance to meet some others who are in that same place in life, and you're going to get placed in a group, hopefully. We want you connected to Christ and community. We believe this is a running start on it. But ultimately, you are in charge of the voices that you have speak into your life. We think this could help. We think it's incredibly important. And over the years in my life, where I saw my life go in a season where God was doing good stuff in my life and transforming me, the future me, into the me he created me to be and how he's working in my life, there were always other people around my life. And a lot of times it was in a small group setting, but there was community. There was life on life. You were not created to do life alone. So what I want you to do is to answer this question. Who are you going to invite into your life this week, and how will you do it? Who are you going to invite to speak truth into your life, and how are you going to do it this week? Who and how? Because if you don't have a plan, you're probably not going to do it. It's probably just information. But ultimately, you got to do something with what you know is important. What I know is true for every single one of you is you are created to do life connected to others. Who is that for you? And this week, how will you leverage the who and the how? How will you leverage that? And who will it be to invite them to the table to speak truth in your life? Maybe it's by getting in a group. Maybe it's by asking someone to write you a letter. Maybe it's just saying, let's go for coffee. Only one person is in charge of that for you. And it's you. And it matters more than you could possibly imagine. Let's stand for closing prayer. Next week, we're going to conclude this series, Talking to Myself. And it's also, once we do this once a year, it's also Next Gen Sunday. And we're going to call it Dear Younger Me, as we talk about talking to myself and how younger me really does matter in terms of future me, and speaking into the next generation helps shape their future them. And so I hope you'll be here with us as we conclude this series. Let's pray together. God, you created us not to do life alone, but to do life together. who is around our life really is important. And there are some people in our life that we don't have control of. They're in our family, they're in our work, they're in our school, they're around us, and we've got to work hard to manage how their voice speaks into our life and what we do with it. But God, give us a lot of wisdom and insight of who we need to invite to the table of our life, who we need to invite to pull up a chair and sit at the table with us, and how we can best leverage their voice to change our inner voice, to make sure that we're speaking truth to ourselves. God, you are the one that was created to be the primary influence in our life. So I pray that you always have a seat at our table, the primary seat at our table, and that you are influencing us, and you are influencing the people who are speaking into our lives. And we would pay attention to this law of relationship that you created us with. You created us to live life connected to you and others. Help us to not be casual about that, but to leverage it for your good purposes. And I pray this week for the people who will speak around us and into our lives, and you would use that for your good purposes. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thanks for being here. If you'd like to talk to me down at the front.